question to ask when it comes to ethics is related to death. The question that I would like to ask: what dies when we die? And who dies when we die? You have the Democritus approach. There is an atom that is immutable, doesn't die, infinite, stays there, and even if we die, that atom will stay. Muslim and Christian has the idea of a soul. I don't think it's clear in Judaism, but for both Islam and Christianity, the idea of soul is somewhere there, even though we have some kind of scholars in Islam that questioned the idea of soul, and they said, we don't have a definition, which is true. And Muhammad in the Quran said, only God knows about the soul. So, really, that leaves us in the dark. But still, let's take it at face value and think that there is a soul inside us, and it really raises the question of, or in some way, resurrection. Who is gonna be resurrected at the end of times? It looks like in Islam the story is that God is gonna reform or rebuild our bodies somehow. The soul will be still there since they don't die, and the soul have another problem. When God breathed life in Adam, did he breathe in or out? Assuming that there is no out or outside to God, then God breathed in. Hence, the soul is part of God. Hence, we are part of God. We are really eternal, if we take it at face value. So, God breathed life within himself, because he cannot breathe outside of himself. There is no outside to God. And at least, not only for Muslim, almost for all monotheist religion, there is no outside to God. He is it, everywhere, every time, anytime. So, that's the story that we have. Now, let's go back. If the soul is something eternal and it's part of the breath of God, therefore, that thing will remain in place, and then God, at the end of time, will rebuild our bodies around this soul. Of course, one wonder, it doesn't really make any sense, but hey, this is at least our story. Now, we have a third option with metempsychosis or reincarnation. Reincarnation gives another kind of approach. Whatever is inside, it stays, it jumps from one body to another. And actually, the last day will become something eternal, that your soul will be jumping from one body and another, and if you miss it or mess it up with one body, then the next life you will probably get punished until you clear your name and yourself, and then the third life will be a little bit better, and etc. So it's like a cycle of this soul moving from one body to another. In other words, the body will become really useless or actually irrelevant. The soul will be moving from one body to another. It's the soul. For Islam and Christianity, the body is really a very questionable issue. do our bodies sin? And the body actually is associated with sin. So, if we go, for example, to the Old Testament and the 613 mitzvah that the Jews came up with, that God really banished or banned or something like that, one of them, which we interpret today as forbidding incest, forbidding anything with close relative, it doesn't come that way. The way it's put in the Old Testament is that you should not uncover the nakedness of your father or your mother or your sister. Seeing the body or the naked body is actually the sin. The same thing for Adam and Eve. I mean, let's take the story at face value one more time. They eat the apple and they realize they were and are naked and feel shame. I don't know why they felt shame. How did they know that was a shameful something to be naked? The story here doesn't make any sense. But in any case, what I'm trying to say here is that the story, the way it's put, places the sin with the body. The body carries somehow the sin that we have or feel or something like that. And it takes after that, as soon as you realize that you are naked, you feel shame and then you are screwed, basically. Which doesn't make any sense. But what really makes sense in our story is that the sin is associated with the physical appearance of the person. Why I'm mentioning this, if the physical appearance can carry shame and sin, then you wonder if God will not be punishing one way or another this physical appearance. Since sin is associated with a physical appearance, then God must be decent enough to punish this physical appearance. Now, for Muslim and Christian again, they kind of escaped this issue by creating this idea of a soul. So, the sin, the problem, everything else will move to the soul and the body will be left apart. As I said, for Muslim we have especially Ibn Hazm. Ibn Hazm, he's a great scholar, but he questioned the idea of soul, and he said there is no such a thing. We don't have a definition in Islam, in the Quran, in the Prophet's tradition. Therefore, the soul is an appearance, a physical appearance, that will die with the man's death or the woman's death. So once we die, the soul will go away with us. Which makes it really now here a problem is that when you talk about resurrection, at the end of day and God is going to be probably punishing or doing whatever, who is he going to get there? The body doesn't make any sense. What is he going to do with the body? The body, I mean, if somebody dies at 90 or 100, what is he going to do with the body? And then if the soul doesn't exist, then you wonder the idea of punishment or reward, actually both of them, will go for what exactly? What is God is gonna punish or reward? So, as I said, there are three options. One is Democritus, who created the idea of an atom that is inside us that will be forever there, and even if our body dies, the original atom that forms human beings will stay alive. Then we have some of the monotheism or monotheist religion with the idea of a soul. even though, as I said and mentioned, the soul in Islam is very, very questionable. And then we have the idea of reincarnation. So these three questions are definitely serious when we discuss death. Now I want to add another dimension. Death was always considered as an end in some way to a certain type of life. If we change the definition of death from end to transition, the whole story will change with it. If when I die, instead of saying I ended or my body ended or something ended, I say I transitioned from this form of being to another form of being, then the whole question is resolved. Death was always associated with nothingness or non-being. When it wasn't, especially for monotheism really insisted that there is an end, there is a stop there. When you die, there is a stop, and God starts counting from before that. What did you do and what didn't you do? As if it's a stop. There is a line there. I mean, if you take it in another perspective where people didn't think that death is a stop, it's just a transition from one type of life to another type of life, then basically the whole story will be resolved differently by saying, okay, now such and such transitioned, which is, the word is now used, but if we use it really rationally and mean it, then death will become X transitioned from this form of being to another form of being, without mentioning a line or a stop or an end one way or another. Life becomes different as well as death. So, what I am trying to say here when it comes to this issue is that death is almost a semantic problem. The way we present it, the way we describe it, makes a huge difference. If you describe a person dying as ending, then yes, that's a problem. Because if it ended, then everything he did before needs to be accounted for. If you are part of a religion with an afterlife, then all of those deeds will be counted against somehow else. However, if you describe his death as a transition, like with the Egyptian, the pharaohs really transitioned on a boat from this life to another one. They get on their boat supposedly and cross on a river from this life to the next life. They didn't die. They never die. The notion of death didn't exist as we perceive it now. Death is really a cultural idea rather than, I don't know, it's not in nature. Yes, it is. We die. I understand. The problem is that how we describe it, animals do not describe their death. I don't think animals know or think that they are dying. They are not like us. We live with the idea that we are, by the time we are mature, even before maturity, I mean, by 10, I think, every kid knows that he's gonna die one way or another. And he lives with that idea. The problem is that we live with it without making any difference. It's not like somebody reaches 60 and says, okay, I'm gonna stop investing because I am gonna die soon. Nothing happens like that. It is true, we know it, we know it's coming. We don't take action. Base it on that knowledge. Death is something that we live with every day, but it doesn't make any difference in our daily life and our daily activities. As I said, no one who is 60 or 70 or even 80 walks down the street to go to a supermarket or a drugstore or a grocery store and buy something. He never goes there with the idea that, shit, I might not make it, I might die on the way there. No. A human being go with the assumption and conviction, actually, that he's gonna go where he's intending to go and buy whatever he's intending to buy and bring it back home. So, idea related to death. We know it, we feel it, we realize it, but it doesn't make a major difference in our life. Animals, I am not sure. I mean, I saw that primates do not know about death. Chimps can carry stillborn up to 60 to 65 days until that creature become like a piece of junk that they are carrying with them for 60 to 65 days without them, those animals, realizing that that thing that they were carrying is dead already. It was dead 65 days ago. They won't. Even for some animals who know about death, kind of, if we take it that way, like dogs or elephants or camels, I read, I don't think they live their entire life with the idea that death is coming at one point. No. Probably by the end they know that there is something wrong and they might go sit somewhere or rest somewhere near earth, near the ground. I'm not sure they know that they are going to their death. Death in the sense of end. And that's how we are used to the notion of death. End doesn't exist. And exists only culturally for us humans. We put together all the numbers and we say, we are gonna die by the age of, let's say 80. I don't know, it depends on the era. People use it to be, the average age used to be 40 in some culture, and then sometimes now it's the average is probably between 70 and 80 or even more. But does that make any difference? So now they are saying that Japan has the people who live the longest. But do we know, does it make any difference to those people living in Japan? Do they wake up every morning and say, we are in the luckiest place on earth, we are gonna live up to, we have a chance to live up to 100? No. They wake up like us, we wake up in the United States, and like people wake up in Somalia, where the average probably is between war and all kind of disease problems is probably 40. They wake up the same way. So that is what's important. We know about death. It doesn't make any difference in our daily life. We know it. It's here. It's an intellectual or rational or reasonable understanding of the cycle of life. Now, let me go back now to the main story. We humans know we are dying. It doesn't make any difference in our decision in anything we do. And if Warren Buffett still make bets on what stock is gonna be good tomorrow and what stock is not, and actually I saw him when he said that I can't bet on a crypto because it's not a safe bet in the future. Warren Buffett, I think, is in the 90s. And still, he acts like he's 20s. I love that. It's amazing. But that tells you that how we approach this whole thing. So, I will go back to the original point. Ethics and death. It's an important thing. How do we perceive it? It's a semantic and it's also a cultural thing. What do we consider death? Is it an end or a transition? Once we switch by thinking it's a transition, the idea will become totally different. If we consider it as an end, as in there will be an accountant on the other side who will be calculating what you did, good and bad, and then submit a report to God, and God then will say, you are screwed, you are going to go to hell, or you did well, you are going to go to heaven. So that approach is extremely important. And I think it comes part of the package of monotheism. Monotheism has a God, has one guy at the end of the rope there waiting for you to make a mistake or to make something good, and he feel like you are accountable for everything you do, and he's gonna judge you but based on that. Now, if you are in a polytheist environment with many gods, that will be a little bit better, because there is nobody at the end who will be calculating your deeds or judging your deeds, whether they were good or bad. And even if there is, it's one opinion. There are other gods. You probably can, by the last minute, change your allegiance and loyalty from one god to another, and probably the other one will judge you better. Like the Greek gods or any kind of polytheism. You can be on the good side of God X, even though you were on the bad side of God Y. And you can come up with a solution. It's just the idea of this dictator that is monotheism, that is Allah or Jehovah or Jesus somehow. That's the biggest problem. The biggest problem with death is when it comes to monotheism. Monotheism has one God, one judge, a pure, ruthless dictator, and we know that from history. He was never friendly, that guy. Okay? Especially Jehovah. Jehovah was a ruthless killer. There is no doubt about it. And you do not really want to be on the bad side of Jehovah, because he's gonna judge you and screw you. Same almost with Allah. So I think ethics related to the perception of death are mostly associated with monotheism. Polytheism will be definitely more tolerant, more open to other options. Thank you.